slowly learning about this subject. But I tried to Google. There's not a whole lot on the subject. It's more about, jokes and horror
Mm,
stories of, what it's like with a mother-in-law, and, the whole concept of mama's marrying a mama's boy. And yet I thought, oh my goodness, my friends and I, we talk about how, our sons are a mama's boy. And I thought, geez, I don't want us to be, those horror stories, but how
yeah.
can we nurture a wonderful relationship with our daughter-in-laws?
Yeah. I love that you brought up the fact that you mentor women because you are such a powerful mentor. Your voice of truth is has impacted many wives, and I'm sure there will be some who are watching here who can say you have asked us the hard questions and made us think about what we really are feeling and answering, not just what we should answer. I know that we've talked about before as wives, we're going to have to make a decision with our husband that sometimes will go against what our parents might say. And I would love if you could speak into the situation of where we're married, and this happens whether you just became a wife
Mhm.
or you've been married for 12 years,
Mhm.
because every
Mhm.
opportunity is situational, and you're
Mhm.
going to find yourself in a space you've never been in before. And we carry into our marriages expectations, like you said, experiences,
Mhm.
trauma that triggers how we might deal with the situation. But now we're in partnership with our husband, and it's a whole
Mhm.
new thing. It's not like we don't just get to do what our parents did for us.
Yeah.
And so, um, can you speak to what it's like to have to make a decision
Mm.
with your husband that might go against what your parents say? And then what that looks like for a mother in law, and how maybe you have found strength to be a support in that space, even if they're having to make a decision on their own.
Mhm. Yeah, I realized that because we're bringing in those normals, it's like this was normal in my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Mom took care of the home, dad took care of everything outside. And in today's world, my son said, Mom, it's 50-50. We both can do inside and outside, which I totally agree. But, he had to be brave enough to stand up to me to say, like, please don't expect that my wife's going to be a great cook because you're a great cook.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I like to cook and she likes to clean up. That's great. I'm glad that they could work it out. But I know it's not that easy for some people, especially when it comes to traditions. I know one young woman that I was mentoring, and she was getting ready to get married. And one of the things, just in their engagement year, where it was like, no, we always have Christmas together. And she's like, but my family always has Christmas together too. And how do you navigate some of those really tough, traditions, and, ways that kids are disciplined, and how you're going to raise your kids? And my encouragement always is, as husbands and wives, you need to decide together what is best for your family. Just because it worked in one family or it didn't work in another, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen for you. And so, together as husbands and wives, you have to talk about it. It's like I grew up never learning about money management or budgeting. And so I grew up, fearful of people not managing their money well, because I seen the effects of it, where relatives would have their cars towed because they didn't make a car payment, or they got evicted, and those kind of strong words. And I was so terrified. And my husband grew up in a family that managed their money well, so I'm like, I'd like to learn from his side of the family. So, a family that is like, what are you worried about budget? I'm like, no, budgeting is really important, because I've learned through my husband that that's something that's very valuable for your future. So I had to kind of, even for myself, push against the norms of my own family and childhood and be okay to choose the way my husband would like us to lead our family. So with my son, it was a great conversation to just say, Mom, just because how you are as a mother and a wife, my wife may not be that way. And it's so true. I can't just expect her to be just like me. She is her own person. So I do encourage that. So it's kind of like, Mom, you know what you advise all the girls you mentor? Well, here's your situation. And so, easier said than done. So I had to
Yeah.
answer that too, because it
Yeah.
was like, yes, you're absolutely right. It's a different generation. You guys are deciding, roles and, duties in the household or decision making, and I have to be okay with that.
What feelings did you come across when he confronted you? And how did you manage those feelings? Was it like, did you find yourself feeling offended or just kind of startled? Or was it like oh, I understand. I just am curious. I would love to
Yeah.
know from that perspective. And then also how, as wives, and maybe like you're saying, it's about a partnership, developing principles of our marriage. We're developing boundaries for
Mhm.
ourselves as a couple
Yeah.
with the people that have given their whole lives to help us be who we are, and now we're learning a whole new way of becoming something else together. Okay, so I just asked a bunch of questions. One was what feelings you had when he confronted you and was like, "This might be what you did, but this isn't what we're gonna do."
Mhm.
And uh, and then how can we as wives in partnership with our husbands communicate those kinds of things with
Mhm.
our mother-in-laws?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, at first, every step of the way, it's very easy to get offended, and defensive. I won't lie about that. We had some rough spots where my son felt very much in the middle because I raised him to like be honest with me and like honor your wife and put her first. But when it came back at me, I was like, whoa, it doesn't always feel good to be like, okay, Mom, your way is not the perfect way and the way for everybody. And so, if I were to be honest, and like my son knows me so well, we're so close that, you know, me feeling a little hurt or a lot hurt, I could tell it hurt him because he felt really in the middle. And I really had to just apologize to both of them that if my face showed or my words told that, I wasn't feeling like super happy about hearing what I just heard, but really working towards that. So I had to quickly ask for apologize and ask for forgiveness quickly because I knew that it didn't make them feel good. And, so I had to really wrestle with that. And, nothing's wrong with them knowing how I feel, but I think I needed to be really careful not to stay there too long because it could really sour the whole relationship and not move past it. So, honest feeling, tricky, tricky, tricky. I mean, I can put on a fake face and say I'm fine, but to be very honest, there were many moments where I felt a little hurt and offended, but I was thankful that God really corrected me quickly and said you need to apologize. But sometimes, it might have been an hour or 2 hour of navigating what was going on and how people are feeling hurt because it's not only me, right? When one person hurt, everybody gets affected. So, navigating everyone's feelings and situation. It's kind of crazy because, it's until you're in that situation, you can mentor, encourage, and until you're put in that situation, you have to deal with the reality of it's not always as you plan it will be.
Yes, and that can be said of our roles as wives, our roles as moms, our
Mm,
roles as leaders, our roles in
yeah,
community. It's not going to go linear. Growth is not going to happen the way we think it is.
yeah,
Relationships are going to get messy probably before they get deeper and better.
yes,
Um and I'm thankful, thank you for being honest, with the fact that you had to deal with your feelings and ask for upon apology. I think taking ownership is a huge way for us to build stamina in our marriages, whether it's, in our relationship with our husband or in our relationship with our mother-in-law.
yeah,
And in the other perspective, in your perspective as a mother-in-law, taking ownership for my feelings, apologizing is not, I would say, something that I grew up with. I and my husband will be the first one to tell you that, an apology doesn't come easy for
yeah,
me. Sure, I can say I'm sorry, but is it genuine enough for the next action to look different than,
absolutely,
mine did
yeah.
before? And that is big. Is there a would you say in your experience, um, and this is something you and your husband Guy taught me while we were doing pre-marriage counseling. So this was like this is like 12 years ago. I remember
One year
we
for
were
this.
sitting at the airport. It
Mhm,
was some I don't think it was Zippy's. It was some restaurant near the airport, not Starbucks, but, in that little we just left work. We all worked together at the office at the college.
mhm,
We're sitting there, and you told me, if there's conflict, ask for a certain amount of time,
yes,
but but commit to resolving it
yeah,
after this amount of time.
yes,
And because my nature is I'm just gonna walk away and pretend it never happened. Well,
mhm,
of course, that's not the healthy way to do it. And my husband's, nature is, "Let's fix it right now. Nobody's walking away from
yeah,
anything." And so that was really helpful, and as I hear
mhm,
you talking about the realities of conflict
mhm,
between mother-in-laws and daughters-in-laws,
mhm,
could this principle work in that same relationship? Could there be enough space, enough respect, enough honor between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law to say, "Hey, I'm feeling this way. Like, can we circle back to this
mhm,
conversation in
mhm,
a certain amount of days or
mhm.
times?" Have has that is that something that you've experienced or maybe could speak
Mhm.
into?
I absolutely believe that, that same principle can work. In fact, we even told it to my son and daughter-in-law that, isn't it weird? God just puts opposites together when it comes to dealing with conflict. And, that's something that it's over time you understand what's a good time for someone to feel like there will be a resolution for the person that needs to deal with it right now. But I think, even for in relationship with mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, absolutely knowing what their conflict resolution style is something to be mindful of. And and sometimes just giving it time, because nobody really wants to say something to hurt someone's feeling. But we know in the heat of the moment, it can come to a point where, you're just frustrated or tired or whatever the feelings are, that words could come out that you may not mean. So I always feel like giving each other space is a good thing, to be able to just give for both parties, even a resolver, because the intent of wanting to resolve it can come from a wrong place. It's to prove that you're right, not necessarily that you're hearing the person. So absolutely, I feel that knowing each other's conflict resolution style is so helpful, and to be honoring of that. But it's also communicating, that I need a moment to think about this, or I need a moment to get myself together so that I can even talk because sometimes it's you're trying to hold yourself together just because you don't want to cry in front of each other. And that's a hard thing. So it is okay to say, take a deep breath, let's see how we're doing in 5 minutes and see if we're okay to talk about it. Fortunately, my daughter-in-law and I have never had like direct conflict. It's like we go through my son. And that was my problem is,
Mm,
I'll just tell my son like what's going on, and it was important that I needed to include her. And
mm,
so now I have to be really intentional, and sometimes I forget, but I try to be much better about when I text my son, I text both of them.
mm,
When I call my son, I always say, "Hey, is your wife there? Put me on speaker." Because I don't want it to ever be that I'm hiding something from her or, talking about her behind her back. So I always want to be inclusive of her. And so, I have to really make sure that my words are encouraging and I'm asking good questions to be helpful and not hurtful. And so, including her cleared up, I think, a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication. And so, fortunately, I've never had any conflict directly with her, but I know I put my son in the middle of it because he would get it wrong how to communicate until his wife decided, here's what happened or what I said. So I was like, okay, I have to be better about it. And my son said, Mom, please, can you text both of us? Absolutely. I'm sorry if I forgot. But it's so
I
we're still
love that.
practicing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that he was able to figure out, like, realize what would be a good solution for them and kind of get himself out of the middle.
Mhm,
And there was this space to say, oh, yeah, it wasn't that you weren't trying to include her. It just, you
mhm,
hadn't thought of it, you
mhm.
know. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a perfect segue to the next question, which would be like, what are some things that that practices that you've had to kind of put in place in order to build that communication level with your daughter-in-law, and also the idea that oftentimes if we're not intentional, we do put our husbands in the middle of the
Mhm,
relationship
mhm,
between us and their mom,
mhm,
and that is a quick way to wear them out.
mhm.
And, if we're talking about how to build stamina for the
Mhm,
long haul in our marriages, if we are a wife, are going to have a mother-in-law figure
mhm,
somewhere who
mhm,
has spent their life, helping to raise our husband. And so there's going to be some kind of relational dynamic that we
mhm.
get to work
Yes.
on and we get to be intentional about.
Yeah.
Um,